So let's raise a talking point. Indian nurses in ISIS custody, what really are the options before our government to secure its citizens? And joining me tonight, hopefully to throw some light on that, Hardeep Singh Puri, member of the BJP, India's former United Nations envoy, Ambassador KC Singh, well-known former diplomat, Atul Aneja, Associate Editor, Strategic Affairs from The Hindu, and representing the Congress Party, Manishankar Iyer. Welcome to all of you on the program. Hardeep Puri, let me first begin with you, and let me draw your attention, sir, to the comment which was made by the External Affairs Ministry spokesperson today, where he categorically claims that India is in touch with the right people in Iraq. However, when a specific question was put to him in terms of who these people were, he wasn't very forthcoming. Now, I do understand, Mr. Puri, that this could be a case of secrecy being a strategy, as is often the case in matters like these. But I just want clarity from you, sir, that do we really have a strategy, or hopefully this is not a scenario where all of us are at sea completely? Mr. Puri, can you hear me?
Let me. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes,
I don't think primetime television. I don't think primetime television is the forum where you discuss the options which a government has, or precisely the kind of modalities which are being discussed. And I find the suggestion whether we have a strategy at all, even raising that question, I find somewhat surprising. I think the issue is receiving the attention of the government at the highest level. The External Affairs Minister personally, the entire machinery of the Ministry of External Affairs in Delhi, and our missions and posts in the region, which have been fortified by addition of personnel, and the Prime Minister are focusing on what needs to be done. My position on this is quite simple. I think the primary objective just now is to make contact with all the stakeholders who have some influence, some margin of persuasion, which can be utilized in this evolving, dangerous sectarian civil war, which means reaching out at the highest level to the people who are the decision makers in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Iraq, and indeed elsewhere, the Russians and the Americans. And I have absolutely no doubt that all these issues are receiving the kind of attention that is deserved.
Okay.
Insofar as sharing information with the media is concerned, I think it is essential to keep the country informed as to what precisely are being taken in terms of broad steps. But in terms of specific details on who's being spoken to and what the game plan is, I don't think that is a subject of a prime time discussion of the kind that we are having just now.
I take your point, and that's why I said that I do understand that secrecy sometimes is a part of strategy, but I just want to be absolutely sure, because just looking at the statements which were being made at that news conference which was being addressed by the MES spokesperson, I did feel a little uneasy. But Manishankar, let me bring you in. Why is it, Manishankar, that here is Hardeep Singh Puri who's making me feel that the government at the highest levels is working overtime to deal with the situation, but the family members of those who are still stuck in Iraq are suggesting that the government acted too late? Now, which of these two scenarios is correct, Mr. Iyer?
I think perhaps it's true on both sides. I do agree with Hardeep Puri that in a crisis of this kind, the government must be making every effort it possibly can to be able to free these hostages. At the same time, we've got families who are deeply concerned and want to hoping desperately that their relatives will come back, and therefore their anxiety is completely understandable, and hence they're feeling that not enough is being done. But fortunately, there is an inheritance from the previous government, in fact the previous 60, 70 years, of a warm relationship between India and all these West Asian countries, and I would hope that the assets that we have left behind will be leveraged by this government, as has been indicated by Ambassador Hardeep Puri, to secure the release of these people.
Right. So you believe...
But all of this shows
yes,
that unlike the President's address, which completely neglected West Asia and the Gulf, it must be a high priority of this government, whatever its earlier prejudices, to maintain a very, very close link to the countries of this region, where 7 million of our people work, and from where we get something like 70% of our oil and a huge amount of our remittances.
But I just want to...
cannot afford
right.
to neglect the West Asia and the Gulf in the manner indicated in the President's address.
I just want to look a little more closely in terms of what really is happening on the ground, because even this news, the fact that these 46 Indian nurses had been taken away by ISIS to some other location wasn't given by the Indian government. It was given by some of the family members to the media. And when this question was raised before the government, then this kind of statement was prepared. Be that as it may, Ambassador KC Singh, coming to the debate here. Let's be very realistic about this one, sir. What are our options? What is it you believe that India can do to ensure the safe return of all these 46 nurses who've been taken away by ISIS?
Look, I can understand Ambassador Puri explaining and assuring us that the government is doing all that they can, but any government functions at multiple levels. The diplomatic levels are never secret. Diplomatic levels should have been obvious and apparent by now. All that we have seen is that the External Affairs Minister summoned the heads of mission and she had a meeting with them.
Right.
And we sent back a former ambassador to Iraq, to Baghdad, to go and leverage his contacts there. But I think what should have been done in the last about 3 weeks is that we should have had either the NSA or the External Affairs Minister or special envoys carrying letters from the Prime Minister to go and meet the ruling families in the Gulf, people in the leadership in Russia, in Tehran, Washington, as well as in Syria and the other neighboring countries, Jordan, etc. And this should have been happening at least 2 weeks ago, where then we would have had feedback at the highest level on what is the perception of those countries on the evolving situation.
So are you suggesting that you're not satisfied, Ambassador Singh? Are you not satisfied with what has been done so far by the government?
I'm not satisfied.
Is pointing out.
No, to simply say that the government is doing enough is not visible. Diplomatic activity is visible.
Right.
It should be obvious what the government is doing, and that is not visible.
Okay.
I think, in all fairness, they've just come in. They haven't settled down, but I think I would have expected if the minister or NSA were tied down in Delhi, they should have somebody like Jaswant Singh. He was so closely, he had such close equation with King Abdullah when he was the crown prince. They should have sent somebody like him. Why are they not using the assets they have?
Right.
So they are simply sitting back and getting feedback from people in the field. Now heads of mission get their information at second hand.
Right.
They are not primary players in this.
Ambassador
and
Puri,
I would have liked some primary action.
You would have liked some primary action. Ambassador Puri, you want to respond to that before I go to Atul Aneja? I mean, you say that the secrecy always has to be a part of strategy, and I take that point, but respond to the point now being made there by Ambassador Singh. The diplomacy must be seen.
No, I have no disagreement with what KC is saying. I've had the privilege of knowing him for 40 years.
Sure.
We joined the Foreign Service the same day. But you see, I would just like to mention to you that the idea that you need to send special envoys to Saudi Arabia, to the other countries which have a role to play. He mentioned Jordan. I would even include Bahrain, to Qatar, if you like. Anyone who has an influence on this newly emerging militia entity, ISIS, yes, I think that those are very good ideas. All that I can tell you is that, I mean, I've been traveling, I've got back last night, and I'm happy to respond to your invitation. What KC is saying is eminently sensible, but I am not aware whether this has been done or not.
That's the point.
Insofar
as that's the point. No, you say you're not aware of whether it's been done or not. Now, Ambassador Singh believes that if it's not being done, sir, then it's a weakness on part of the government.
No, please, I think you should be a little patient. In the world of diplomacy, you don't look only for photo opportunities. There may be ways in which people have already reached out. There may be, you do not have to, every special envoy does not have to be accompanied by a press release and fanfare and the beating of drums. Therefore, all I'm saying is, suggestions of the kind that KC is making I have myself been making those suggestions much earlier, because the kind of sectarian civil war that we have seen unfolding is something some of us in fact anticipated.
Right.
Now that fact that we will have consular issues is well known. There is Mr. Manishankar Iyer, a very respected senior colleague, says he hopes that we will leverage the assets created in previous decades. He is absolutely right. In fact, assets are not generated by a government which is only 1 week or 3 weeks old. I have absolutely no doubt that people who are responsible and who have been entrusted this responsibility are doing what they are. You can quarrel about the extent to which information is being made available in the public domain. That is the limited point on which I would have a nuance to provide on what
I want to argue with you also in terms of whether we know who we are dealing with. Atul Aneja, there are two very different points which are being projected here. There is the government's view which is being offered there by Ambassador Puri, and then there is the counter view, which is the diplomatic view, which is being offered by Ambassador Singh. Where do you stand on this one, Atul? Do we really know who we're dealing with? You believe that Indian government knows what they're doing, who they're dealing with?
No, I think it's very important to realize the internal situation in Iraq. I do not believe that it is the ISIS which is doing all the fighting. There is a lot of element of Sunni tribesmen who are involved. They are ex-Baathists who are involved in this. So the situation is far more complex. We need to engage all the elements at various levels, and I do think we have the nodes from our experience with Iraq in previous eras to engage with these tribesmen, these ex-Baathists and others, because if we do not understand the complexity of the internal situation, we may not be pulling the right nodes which can deliver. So that's one. I agree on this, that your diplomacy and your engagement has to be at multiple levels, and one level has to be at the highest level and probably visible. But I do think that there is a great weakness at the grassroots level. People do not understand the nuances of the ground situation sufficiently enough. The language becomes a barrier. So I do not think we have also enough let's say critical mass to do back channel contacts, which would be so essential to tackle a situation like this.
Right.
This is one point, but I think there's another deeper point, which is that this we are doing at this time crisis management, we are doing firefighting, but I strongly believe that we need to take a much broader view to do preventive diplomacy to ensure that situations like these do not emerge, and that will come if we as a country engage Iraq and the region in a much more geopolitical manner with that perspective, because we seem to be passive engaged in this region in terms of oil, in terms of manpower, but in terms of a capacity to influence this region, which affects us so badly, I don't think we are doing a great job out of it.
Manishankar,
so I think the preventive element is another thing which
the
we should
preventive
look
element.
at
We're doing firefighting. Manishankar, we're doing firefighting, and who better than you? You understand this region so well. You've been associated with diplomatic engagements in the past as well. I mean, if we can't handle this one well, sir, I sometimes wonder that, what if there is an impending oil crisis which is looming before us? How will we deal with that? Do you believe that the Indian government has a long-term strategy to deal with what is unfolding before our own eyes in Iraq today?
This government does not. One can only pray that this will teach them the lesson that they have to have such a long-term plan. But I am glad to say that because we had worked all this out in several decades previously, when we had a similar but not the same crisis in 2004, the government were immediately able to pick the right man, that is Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, rush him to Baghdad, and he knew how to handle the situation, and we were able to get our hostages back. Now the routine things have been well done. I understand the government have arranged for 900 people to be brought back, and that we have 3 Air India planes waiting to evacuate whoever else wants to come out. But I think that it's very important that a party that has not attempted to cultivate these countries during the time that it was in opposition.
How does it do that? But how does it do that? How does it do that?
Because a party that hasn't done that is now in power, and it is necessary that they make up for what they have left behind, what they haven't done in the past, by doing it now.
Okay. Ambassador Puri, you want to take that one? I mean, the BJP has been in the opposition. The BJP's job, perhaps if the BJP was in opposition today, you know, you've been criticizing the Congress party. Now, there are Congress leaders like Salman Khurshid, Ambika Soni, Manish Tiwari, who are being openly much more critical of you than a Manish Shankar here, be that as it may. But my point to you, sir, is this, that, you know, on the one hand, Mr. Puri, on the one hand, you have to deal with the ground situation which exists in Iraq today, and we are dealing with Indian lives here. I'm sure that we have strategic assets there. I'm sure, as you point out on the program, that there are people that the Indian government has engaged to ensure that these Indian human beings can be brought back safely to India. But all this aside, do we have a long-term concrete strategy to ensure, because this is going to be a conflict zone. How are we going to move in this conflict zone, Ambassador?
Let me get in a few words quickly before I leave the program, because I have a commitment elsewhere.
Okay.
First of all, I do not recall criticizing anyone either in a crisis situation or the previous government's West Asia and Gulf policy. So let me say that for the record.
No,
Second
not
issue,
about you. It was
which
about
is
your
far
party.
more
That's
important.
all.
We have. Yeah, forget it. I'm 4 months old in the party, and I'm not in a position to assume responsibility for what other spokesmen are saying.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you as somebody who spent 40 years, 39 years in the Foreign Service.
Right.
Look, let's be absolutely clear. We have a crisis on our hands. That crisis has to be dealt with. We need to get every single Indian who is stranded there. We need access to them, and then we need to ensure their safety and have them repatriated safely to India. That part, there is no doubt on. Insofar as the long-term strategy is concerned, let me assure you here and now that the points which are being made, including on your program, on there being a need for a long-term strategy, on leveraging the assets which we have assiduously built over 6 decades, all those points are well taken. This is a government which is still finding its feet. I have absolutely no doubt that the External Affairs Minister, the National Security Advisor, and all those who are advising the Prime Minister are doing precisely that. And if other inputs are required, I'm sure they will be forthcoming, and that we are well on the way towards establishing...
These are all very nice words. These are all very nice words. But Ambassador Puri, can you at least tell me, before you go, can you at least tell me, do we even know what is the motive? What is the motive of ISIS group taking all these 46 Indian nurses? Do we know that?
If you are looking for a motive in a fast-changing situation where Tikrit was in the hands of Party A now and is being counter-attacked with Party B, I think just slow down. Stop looking for motives. I don't think these are discussions on prime time television.
I'm just trying to understand the reality. I'm just trying to understand the reality.
I'm afraid
I may not know the reality, but surely you may know. That's all.
The reality on the ground is that if I did get briefed before I came on the discussion, and if there are one or two things I may know in addition to that, I don't think prime time television is the venue.
Can you just give a guarantee that these 46, you leave sir, but I'm just saying, can you in conclusion just give me a guarantee 46 Indian lives will be safe and sound? Is that a commitment that you're willing to make, sir? Are you willing to say that?
I am willing to make... I do not represent the government, but I am willing to make a commitment that the government will do whatever it can, whatever is within its power, to try and ensure the safety and well-being of each one of these 46 people. And thank you very much. I have to go on another channel.
I understand you have to go on another channel. You're a man in demand today, perhaps, Ambassador Puri. But KC Singh, just the points which are being made there by Ambassador Puri. You know, that everything is in control. We know what we're doing. We know that we have our strategic assets. He's not answering the question whether we know what is the motive of ISIS as well. But would you say that isn't there a dilemma also, Ambassador Singh, here for the Indian government, that while we are trying to deal with the present Iraqi government there, we also cannot be in a situation in which we completely alienate the ISIS group, sir?
No, I don't think we should be worried about ISIS is in any way absolutely antagonistic to Indian values and Indian interests. We've seen the maps they've come out with. You've seen that he's declared a caliphate. He's become a caliph. Al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. So ISIS is a malevolent group. Let's have no doubts about that. They'll deal with you and you'll deal with them only out of exerting pressure on them. So it'll have to be the carrot and stick which you use, but for which you would need various other countries and various other friends in the region. That is why I'm saying it was extremely important to be engaging all the principal players, all the principal countries in the region at the highest level. I don't see that having been done by this government. And until that is done and you build a bridge of links, which then exerts a pressure on ISIS, which would include countries directly or indirectly supporting them, you will not get a response from them, because it's not just the Indians, not just the nurses. Nurses, they probably need to man a hospital somewhere. But you got other Indians stuck in Mosul.
Right.
You got other people of other nationalities, including Turks, who have been stuck. But I'm told that Turkey has managed to get some people out by threatening them, which we can't do, because they can take military action from the north. So you have a combination of things happening. It's an evolving situation, and it can worsen. We don't know whether ISIS will be able to hold on to the territory, how bloody the battle will be to retrieve it, or they're able to consolidate. But it's probably too early. They will not start talking about handing over people as yet.
Right.
So we have to just make sure they don't harm them. And therefore, messaging is very important by Government of India.
Right.
There's no point building up hopes. There is no point giving a daily thing on their health, etc. Say it's a dangerous situation. We are doing our best, but I want to see visible diplomatic action.
You're basically suggesting that the government needs to have a much more realistic approach, a much more visible kind of an approach. But Manishankar, I'm just thinking, sir, that what if these 46 Indian hostages, these 46 Indian nurses who've been taken over by the ISIS today, what if tomorrow or day after tomorrow they're moved to another location? And there is a genuine possibility of that. Do you not think, sir, that this fear factor could perhaps increase more if there is a lack of genuine communication which is coming from the government side?
Yes, indeed. And you're quite right. There is every possibility that where it is being rumored that they are now being moved to Mosul, they may be moved somewhere else, to Erbil or somebody else. And we know that the ISIS have been suffering heavy casualties, and therefore they will be in need of nursing care. And these nurses are going to be deployed by the ISIS for their talents, which are the nursing talents. So I share your apprehension. But what I would like to say, as this is probably my last intervention in today's program, is that the government must shed its prejudices and its stated positions with regard to the Muslims. I don't think the Muslim world will take very kindly to the Prime Minister of India announcing that we have 1200 years of slavery and not just 200 years behind us. I don't think those kinds of attitudes are going to help us build up the kind of long-term relationships with these countries of various sects and various beliefs that is absolutely essential for us. Now over here, we will have to be in touch with Iran for the reasons that they are very much a player in the situation. But they're a player not on the ISIS side. And to get our hostages out, we need to be in touch with these Sunni elements. And therefore, having a possibility of talking with Saudi Arabia, talking with Bashar al-Assad if nobody else, talking with Erdogan, all these mean that we have to show a sympathy and an empathy with the Islamic world, which has been singularly absent in the vocabulary of the party that has now come to power. That is my big fear for the future. Of course, my immediate fear is for these 40 innocent Indians who are now in the hands of the ISIS. But I only hope that at the end of the crisis, whenever that is, we will have them safely back with us here in India.
I hope so too. I do hope, and that's why right through this program I've been making this point repeatedly, that I do hope the government really has a strategy. And I do hope that tomorrow or day after tomorrow we'll not see another press conference addressed by the Minister of External Affairs. We're simply told that there is a strategy which is being worked on the ground, and we're not going to share any details. But the other dimension of this entire story, Atul Aneja, perhaps you could take that one, is that all these nurses who've been stuck there in Tikrit for a while now, and a lot of other Indian citizens as well, they knew that the situation was going to deteriorate. Yet many of them, I understand, have chosen not to leave Iraq because of the nature of the contract which they have signed with the respective employers. Where do you see the role, Atul, of the Indian government, the Ministry of External Affairs, to deal with these contracts which have apparently been signed between Indian citizens in Iraq and Iraqi companies?
No, that's a tough one, because I don't blame the nurses if they looked at the situation in a very myopic way, because you know, there are bread and butter issues for them. They have taken loans to come over there, and they need to earn that to return the loans and to look after their family. So it's completely understandable why they would not like to pull out immediately. What the government can do about it, I don't know what exactly. It's possible to talk to the companies, which if it is possible to do it in a conflict situation, that's extremely difficult. But some kind of an intervention to talk to the companies, to give them their dues, etc. And I think that's the minimum extent to which the government can go ahead. But finally, I think it's very important to look at ways of contacting their captors and to get them out at some point in time. I think what's happening is that the southern side is the one. There are a lot of people apart from the nurses now,
Right.
and there's a new dynamic which will be set in by this incident. And there would be a rush for people to come out of Iraq. I think that is another element to this story, which has mutated in two forms. One, the nurses' crisis, and another is the evacuation crisis. I think the government can move very fast on the evacuation side, pull out as many people as possible from Basra, Najaf, and Karbala, and possibly
just ensure,
Baghdad.
hopefully, just ensure
And
that
at
all
least
these
let
individuals
the outflow
realize.
continue from there.
I do
while
hope
then
that-
focus on this hostage crisis.
I agree with you. And in conclusion, the only thing that I would say is that I do hope that the Indian government also has some kind of counseling facility which is available to all citizens who perhaps may have just chosen to be there because they don't want to let go of the money which they could have made. And as Atullah Neja was rightly pointing out, many of these contracts which have been signed between Indian citizens with Iraqi companies indicate or perhaps even prove that they will not be getting their money should they leave before a certain stipulated time. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of India at 9. This will remain the top story, I think, for a while. And I can assure you that we will make every possible effort to get you the very latest right from the ground in terms of the fast evolving situation